Hello and welcome. I am Kim Keen, host of the One of a Kind You podcast. I started this podcast to share my journey of my past self, a woman who was struggling with leaving her teaching career and adjusting to stay-at-home mom life, to help other women with their motherhood journeys or their work-life balance journeys so they can let go and make themselves a priority without all the sacrificing. If you are a regular listener of One of a Kind You, welcome, welcome. I'm so thankful that you are tuning into another episode. And if you are new, I'm equally excited to have you here as well. So the way this podcast typically works is that I share a journal entry of mine from about 7 or 8 years ago, and I reflect on what I know now as a certified life coach and what I wish I knew in the thick of the struggle. But today I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to talk about mindfulness as it relates to navigating healing generational trauma and really life's challenges in general. So this was one of the things that I discovered. I discovered mindfulness very, very early in my healing journey. And I say very early because it was like within, I'll say, the first year or so. And which, if you're a regular listener, you know that that was not a great experience for me. And it came through the therapist suggesting that I meditate. And I thought, like, that's impossible. For 7, 365, there's no way I'm going to. And so what I realized is that when you're focusing on, you're returning to your breath, when you feel like your thoughts are taking over. And so it was with that I started really being mindful of how I was feeling and the thoughts that I was having. And I was able to do that because meditation was giving me this space to do so. And now, granted, let's be real, the mindfulness wasn't always a fluid, smooth practice. And there were times, 3, 4, 5 years into my journey, I wasn't mindful about the thoughts that I was having. I wasn't mindful about how I was feeling. I wasn't mindfully eating. There were a lot of things that I wasn't doing mindfully in that journey. And so the reason I think mindfulness is super important, especially when healing generational trauma, is because oftentimes when we're trying to heal generational trauma, the impact that it's had on our life is really, really profound. But oftentimes it's silent. It's playing in the background and we don't even know it. We don't have that awareness, how it shapes the narrative of our lives, things from our past, things in our present, and what we think about things for our future. And that's totally where I was. I didn't realize that I was having, I'll say, repercussions from generational and childhood trauma when I was struggling in my teaching career. I didn't realize it was showing up when I was in the abusive high school relationship with my boyfriend until I was 21. It was showing up in my marriage with my husband. I didn't realize a lot of and so when I'm almost like a beacon of light, like a lighthouse that helped guide me through interacting with myself, but also with friends and family and strangers. And it was allowing me to have a different perspective on life. And so if you're new to the term generational trauma, it's the emotional or psychological suffering that's passed down from one generation to the next. And so oftentimes it's done with unspoken patterns. And there are things that are imprinted on you that can linger. And it affects families, but it also affects individual people in families. And so it impacts the behavior of others, but on ourselves as well. So with generational trauma, it's the person who is passing it down to the next generation often doesn't even have the awareness that the trauma they've experienced is affecting them and that they're passing it down. So a lot of times what happens is they are projecting their beliefs about themselves onto us. Um, they're, you know, maybe perpetually people pleasers, and they pass that people pleasing behavior onto us. And so, um, and we happens when we're children. And so we're like little sponges and we just soak it up, and we don't know any differently because we don't have experience in a different family. We only have experience in the family that we're born into. And so, um, so with trauma in general, there's a mind body connection. And so we store our trauma in our body just the same way we store our trauma in our minds. And so, um, when we are using tapping into mindfulness to create the awareness around generational trauma and how it's affecting us, we can use the mind body connection to tap into that we're having them. Nervous like experiences where our nervous system is dysregulated and we're in fight, flight, or freeze. We can use mindfulness to recognize what's caused us to um to be triggered to go into that trauma response. We can use the mindfulness to check in with our thoughts to see if they're actually accurate thoughts, or if they're the thoughts of someone else that we've taken on. And so, when we're, and then, okay, you're like, okay, Kim, well, what's mindfulness? And so, mindfulness is really just about being present in the moment without judgment. So, like I was saying, it allows us to become aware of our thoughts, our emotions, and the physical sensations that we're feeling. So, I, after practicing mindfulness, I recognize that, when I'm feeling stressed, my heart starts racing. That immediately tells me that I am hitting that trauma response of fight, flight, or freeze. And it happens in, in all kinds of situations. So, um, when my kids were little and I was really, really in the thick of my healing journey, and my kids immediately start to rise up and fluttering, that racing heart feeling, that tightness in my chest, not in a fight, flight, or freeze situation. You do not need to get to this place of feeling like you are being triggered, because you are safe. Nothing bad is happening to you. It's just your kids being little kids of not listening. And it's normal for kids to not listen to their mom the first 3 times she says, put your shoes on. So when you're mindful in the moment and you can allow the moment to pass without judgment, it really allows you to become aware of your thoughts, your emotions, and the things that you feel physically. So it can open that space for you to recognize patterns that you've inherited, patterns that you're running each and every day, that you think like, oh my gosh, why do I even do this? Like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. And so, so a common pattern that people run is the people pleasing pattern, because we don't like conflict. We don't want people to look at us in a negative way. We want to be valued. We want to feel as though we're worthy. We accepted. And so typically, if you've experienced generational or childhood trauma, you will run into that people pleasing pattern, because that has allowed you to survive and stay safe in previous experiences that were quote unquote stressful or dangerous or uncertain. And so when we can take this moment to be mindful and we can recognize the thoughts, the emotions, the physical sensations, it allows us to make a conscious choice of how we'd like to move forward in that situation. And then we're getting the opportunity to break the cycle. And now, granted, this is not going to feel natural or easy initially. It's going to feel very awkward. It's going to feel very uncomfortable. And you're probably going to question yourself, like, is this real? Like, am I really being mindful? Like, am I really allowed to do something else? Like, I don't even know what to do, so I'm just gonna keep on doing what I'm doing. And so it's really important that you just give yourself space to practice and develop the skill because it will come in time. It gets easier and easier as you do it, but initially it's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel uncomfortable because it's not how you normally operate. And so it just gives you a chance to really step out of survival mode and step into more of like a thriving mode. And so there are many, many, many different ways that you can practice mindfulness. And so one technique that I mentioned already is meditation. And so because it allows you to acknowledge the thoughts that you're having, but you don't have to analyze them, you don't have to critique them, you don't have to judge them, you don't have to do anything with them. You can just acknowledge the thought and let it go. And so, the other activity that you can do is deep breathing. And so this is similar to, I'll say similar to meditation in that, um, you can just focus on your breath and deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And so one of the, um, beauties of deep breathing is that you can also use it in conjunction with emotional freedom technique and which is also known as EFT or tapping. And so when you are doing that, you can just tap on the pointy part of your collarbone that's like front and center in your chest. It's like right in the middle of your neck, that pointy knobby part. You can just tap there with your pointer and middle finger and just breathe. Just take deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth, and that is going to allow you to calm your mind so that you can actually be more mindful in the moment and take notice of what you're experiencing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And so if you're new to emotional freedom technique and you would like to try tapping, um you can actually join us November 29th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard experience it. It's really life-changing. I mean, I have women who attend the workshop and they come into the workshop as stress beyond stress, a level 10, and by the time the workshop ends in 1 hour, they feel so much lighter. They feel like they can actually breathe again and their stress level is down to maybe a 2 or a 3. So the physical change that you feel from emotional freedom technique is significant. It's really life-changing, and it will give you the space to be more mindful. So you can acknowledge the thoughts that you're having. You can acknowledge the way that you feel about yourself for having those thoughts. But the beauty is that it allows you to replace what you think and feel with what you would rather feel instead. So the other thing you can do is a body scan. And so really a body scan is just you can start at the top of your head or you can start at your feet. I like to start at the top of my head and you just notice what you feel on your scalp. So do you feel any tingling? Do you feel an itch? Um, what do you feel? And then you move down to your face and you move down to your neck and you move down to your shoulders and then your arms and then your wrists and then your hands and then your torso and then your hips and then your legs and your ankles and your feet. And so, oh, and your back. And so you literally just start and you literally move from one body part to the next and you just take note of what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and any emotions that you have when you focus on a specific place. And so these practices really provide an opportunity for self reflection and a way to cultivate your inner peace. And so, because that honestly is so priceless, and you're really not going to be able to get inner peace from anyone but yourself. And so, as you work through and you become more mindful, you can take note of people who trigger you, you can take note of things that stress you out, and you can start making a conscious choice of whether you would like to continue engaging with those things or not. And if you, let's just say it's work that triggers you and you don't have the option to find another job or to quit, it gives you the space to come up with ways that you would like to continue moving forward. So you're not at that, you know, high stressed trauma response state all the time. So it's like your thermometer. And so when we're in this heightened state of stress of trauma response, we, run very high on the thermometer, let's just say a 10. But when we're in a calm state of peace and tranquility and this feeling of groundedness, then our thermometer number is much lower. It could be a 1 or a 2. So for me, because my trauma, because I've had various trauma experiences throughout my life, my thermometer tends to run high. So I would say I'm probably, well, not now. I would say I probably am naturally a 2 now, but like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I was naturally probably like a 6. So it didn't take much to get me to a level 10 for my thermometer to explode. Where my husband, he didn't have a lot of trauma response or, traumatic experiences growing up. And even in his early 20s, 30s, like he really doesn't have a lot of trauma. So his thermometer naturally runs at like a 1, I'll say. And so for him to get to a level 10, it really, 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 really takes a lot. And so that was one thing I couldn't understand. I was like, wow, how come he doesn't get irritated and angry and frustrated easily as I do? It's because my thermometer was starting at a higher number than his. So it just allows us to become more attuned, and it gives us space to respond rather than to react. But it also, amazingly enough, when you practice mindfulness on your healing journey, it has a ripple effect. So it not only benefits you, but it benefits your family too. So as you become more attuned to your emotions, your experiences, your thoughts, then you can regulate yourself better. And so you are less likely to have a short fuse, to snap, to lash out. And then that creates a better relationship with your kids, your partner, your spouse. And it's the one of the steps to take to breaking the cycle of generational trauma for future generations. So, so that's the beauty of it, is it's not only benefiting you in your own journey, but it's actually helping the people that you spend the most time with, to help them be the best version of themselves as well. And so, um, before we wrap up, I just want to leave you with some tips for bringing mindfulness into your daily routine. And so, I said this before, it could just be a few minutes of meditation. And so if meditation like monkey brain that never stops, then you can actually set the timer on your phone for 2 minutes. And if 2 minutes even feels like a long time, just set your timer on your phone for 1 minute and just focus on your breath. Find a place, sit with your feet flat on the floor, pretend like there's a string pulling your head up to the ceiling, and just sit there and just breathe in through your nose and out through your nose until the timer goes off. That is one of the easiest ways to start practicing meditation. Now, when I first started meditating years and years and years ago, I used the Calm app, and I still use the Calm app to this day. Calm is great because they have some free beginning options. So they have a 7-day meditation introduction series that you can follow that walks you through it. They have a 21-day series that, if you get through the 10-day one, you're like, okay, this is great. I can do this. A option as well. There are other apps too. So Insight Timer is another really great app for meditations. There are a lot of meditations on Insight Timer. I have not taken Insight Timer because I'll say, a seasoned meditation practitioner. And there are many, many, many options. I'm sure you can even pop on YouTube and find meditations for beginners. The other thing too is just conscious breathing, just being aware of feeling your breath, and body, and feeling your stomach rise, feeling your breath leave your body, and feel the air coming out of your nose on your upper lip. And like I said, the body awareness exercises. So there's a really great meditation to do, and it's 5 things I see, 4 things I hear, 3 things I feel, 2 things I smell, 1 thing I taste. And so when you do that, you're you're really becoming present in the moment. You're really connecting back with your body because it's allowing you to have that space to step out of your mind and connect to the physical um, aspects around you, but also the physicality of your own body. So I really appreciate you taking the time to tune in for another episode. And if you'd be so kind to leave you, I would greatly appreciate it because I take the time to read all the reviews to ensure that this podcast continues to be a place of support and guidance. Really stop shop for resources because let's face it, us ladies, we have got you friends all next